Hey, we got a problem. We got a beautiful old car with some body damage on an older restoration. I got no paint coat and I don't know what is on this car. Huge problem. We're going to show you how to solve it. Come on. Hey, welcome to Paintucation. This is a special one today. Look at this car. This is an amazing car. It's a 1935 Packard senior car. I'm going to get more into the history of the car and what it is and show you around it a little bit later. But the reason it's in my shop is that there was an unfortunate incident. They backed into a mailbox, and of course it needs a repair. So how do we go about repairing it? Here's the damage. Scar there. Scar there, pinstripe has been rubbed off, sort of. And this right here is a dent. Well, spoiler alert, it's just sheet metal. It's just a car. It's 1935. It's no different procedure than repairing a 2025 car. The procedure is the procedure. But here's the challenge. What color is it? This is an older restoration, probably a 20-year-old restoration. And they didn't use the original paint coat. And even if they did, this car was painted in a nitrocellulose lacquer paint. Unavailable anymore. It is, but not for stuff like this. So in the first place, there's a couple of clues to solve in this mystery of this beautiful old Packard. We have to figure out what color it is. We have to figure out what type of paint system is on it. And then we have to, we'll have to do some Dick Tracy voodoo magic work. This pinstripe, I've got to replicate this pinstripe. I've got the one-shot pinstripe painting colors. I'm pretty much going to guarantee that this is not a color that comes out of the can. We might have to blend this. My good friend Rick Harris showed me how to blend that, but that's down the road. We're going to walk you through all of it. And in the first place, if you're in a situation like this and you don't have the paint code, what do? I'm going to tell you. So here's the first thing we do. We have to figure out what type of paint this is, whether it's single stage, whether it's catalyzed or non-catalyzed. It matters because we want to use compatible products. So step one, let's figure out what type of paint this is. Here's how. First thing I'm going to do is find out what type of paint it is. Two ways to do this that are going to give you a really, really rock solid clue. In the first place, what we're going to do is use some solvent. I've got lacquer thinner down here in my cans, just cleanup thinner. You could use acetone if you don't have lacquer thinner. So what I'm going to do is do a flow test. This is lacquer thinner, and I'm rubbing the surface. Now if I turn my rag to you and you see it blue, well it's a blue rag, sorry. If you see blue paint on the rag, which you don't, then you know the solvent hasn't reflowed that paint. So that means it's catalyzed. It's thermoset is a technical term, and it's locked in. So that tells me that this is a catalyzed paint. Great clue. If this came off and I had a bunch of color on this rag, then it's a non-catalyzed paint or even an acrylic enamel. And that sends me down the road of what type of paint it is. So this is a catalyzed paint. Is it single stage or is it clear coat? We need to find that out too. Here's how I'm going to test it. I've got a little piece of sandpaper. This is 320. I've already done it. But right here, I'm going to sand a little bit. I'm right beside the damage. I know I've got to prep that anyways. So look at the sanding dust. It's not blue, right? Sanding dust is white. On my paper, the sanding dust is white. If this sanding dust was blue, or teal, whatever you want to call this color, yeah, throw it in the comments. If the sanding dust was the color of the vehicle, then you know it's a single stage. Now we know this is a catalyzed system, and second clue, this is clear coat. If your sanding dust is white, it's clear coat. If your sanding slurry is white, when it's wet, it's harder to tell, but it'll show clear. So now we know it's a modern paint, it's a two-stage system, base clear, and the clear is catalyzed. Okay, That's huge because now we're in a family of modern chemistry. So how do we repair this? If this is nitrocellulose lacquer, it's a very different set of rules for repairing those materials. This is in my world, and it's probably in your world too. This now narrows us into modern chemistry, current technology. Now we can get a fix on this. So now we know what type of paint it is, what system that we're working with. Now let's talk about the color. Now I need to know if it's a solid color or a metallic color. You can see the metal flake in there, right? There you can really see it. I've got a light on it, and it shows me that it's a metallic color. This type of a light or any type of flashlight, you'll be able to see into it. We've got kind of garbage light here in this shop. Honestly, I've got to change over to LEDs, but this shows me that I've got a nice metallic light. Okay, so now we've got a two-stage metallic. We're getting closer. We're getting closer to the recipe. So I'm going to introduce you to a piece of equipment that I'm privileged to have one here at the Paintucation Training Center and my shop. Come over here, look at this thing. Like I said before, we don't have a paint code. Now, even if I went back into old color books, and there are old color books, and there's databases for color, for old vintage colors, your 70s, 60s, 50s, whatever the muscle cars are, there's data for all of this stuff. Since paint has been put on production vehicles, there are paint codes and data to mix these colors again, right? It's pretty simple. Even if I had an old Packard chipbook that showed me the color code, it wouldn't matter on this car because it's been restored who knows how many times, at least once, right? And now it's painted with a modern base coat, clear coat system with the catalyzed clear on top. That old Packard chipbook does me no good. It might get me in the color family, but it's not gonna get me a color match. What's gonna get me a color match is called a spectrophotometer. It's a color camera. This is one right here. This goes with my system, with the Axalta paint system that I have in my shop. Here's the color camera right here. There's the lens and the sensors right there. And we've got a screen up here. So we'll boot it up. Essentially what this thing does is it takes an image of the color. It analyzes what it is, and then we'll connect it to a computer, and it throws it into a database and searches and does the happy dance and finds the closest match and then brings it back to us and says, here's your color match. So here's how it works. We've got a bunch of icons on the front. We've got a measure, we can delete it, and we can check it, and it allows us to do a bunch of things, to put a name to the color, to do a factory color code for other confirmation. We're not ready to scan yet. This goes on the panel, and it's really simple to operate. It takes 3 scans and averages them out. So it really collects a lot of information. When you're scanning with one of these, or if you're having somebody else do it for you, here's a simple rule. You gotta scan color. Here's kind of what I'm talking about. Look at the paint on this car. This is a late model foreign car. It's an import, it's a German car. Look at these lights. You see how cloudy those are? That's oxidation. Oxidation here. Paint is doing the same thing that light is doing. So before you do any scan, and if you're, like I said, if you're having somebody else do this for you, have them polish the surface. So I've just got a little bit of my favorite rubbing compound, Griot's Garage Fast Correcting Cream. There's my target for my scan. All right, so now I've got 3 icons on here. I'm going to hit measure. And it's going to take 3 scans. So I make sure it's seated, and then I hit the measure icon, one of 3 on top of it, right here. It's thinking about it. Now it wants me to measure 2 or 3, so important. Move it. It won't even measure it if you don't move it around. It wants 3 different areas to sample and compare. That's number 2. And number 3. Make sure it's well seated. All right, so now we've got some information that we can fill out. Manufacturer, paint code, repair order. So that's just information that's important to me. So I know there's somebody out there saying, oh, you got a big color camera. I don't have a color camera. You might not. I didn't until recently. I'm 35 years into this field. I've been training for that long too. This is a new piece of equipment for me, and the paint system that I've got up in my training center, I've never had access to one of these, but you know who has? The paint supply store down the road. I'm in a small city here in Middle Tennessee. There's other cities and small towns that have a paint supply store that has one of these cameras. So before I had this, I would either have them come down to my shop, shoot the color, and then go back and mix it, or I would take a piece off and bring it into the paint supply store, have them clean it, shoot the color, and then get me a mix from there. There's no excuses. Somebody close to you has one of these machines. So you've got the access to this technology, even if you don't have one in your back pocket. So I'm not showing you something that's unattainable or unreachable. You've got access to this technology. I'm just saying. So what we do with this now is we upload it into a computer and then we'll take a look at it. It's pretty cool. All right, so we've got our color camera. We'll put it in the dock and that connects it to the computer system and we'll upload the scan. It's loading the results. All right, there we have it. Packard, blue. We're going to tell it that we want Chromax XP base coat, and it's highlighted an effect color, which means metallic. And now it gives me access to the information on the color formula. For instance, it showed us a match. It went down deep into the database and it found us a color match. So here's what it's given us. Vehicle, this represents my scan. This is the formula that it found. So I've got tools here. I can throw some light at it, brighten it up a little bit, and I can see that it's a pretty dang close color match. You look at it side to side, A to B, it's pretty darn good. And we've got the option of looking at it with different angles. So this gives you near spec, which is in bright sunlight, head on, which is in normal light, and this is a hard side tone, which is like right from the side. So when you look at those, they look almost identical. That's a really close color match. So I'm going to go back. I'm happy with that. That looks good. So let's view the formula. And this shows me all the different ingredients in the formula. It's literally a color recipe, right? You see the description of the color: blue, green, pearl, black, crystalline frost, flop adjuster, organic blue, and medium coarse metallic, medium aluminum, and a binder. So here's the numbers. Here's the amount. And so here's so what we're looking at is XP 106. Here's how to build the color. We got to go in order and mix the colors one at a time into a can. The computer tells us where and how much. So 106, I look here on my rack and I find XP 10356, XP 106. This is the first color that I pour in. And then we go back here and look for XP 105, which is the next one down, and pour it in, and so on and so on and so on. And that way we build the color according to the ingredients that are shown to us. We mix it up and then we test it with a spray card. We'll compare it to the car, because the ultimate judge here is our eyes. The computer gets us close. Our eyes are the ultimate judge, and we'll judge it in different lights, and I'll walk you through that process too. But that's how we arrive at getting color information when there is none. You got to know what you're working on. You got to know what style of paint it is, solid, metallic. You have to know what paint system it is, catalyzed, non-catalyzed, single stage, clear coat. We've got all that information with a few simple tests. And now with this beautiful equipment that we happen to be privileged and fortunate enough to have here at the Paintucation Training Center, now I can dial in the color. So now that I know I'm close on that, I'm really close on that, I don't have to worry about color. Now let's talk about the repair strategy, because there's some challenges on that car. It's not just a box or a bunch of boxes. There's some challenges on that car. We got to figure out where to start, where to stop, and what to paint, and what, more importantly, not to paint. So according to the computer, I've got a really good color match. So what are we going to paint? It's a two-stage color layer followed by a clear layer. That gives me an advantage to where with this zone right here, I can do the repair and I can bring my color and I can just blend my color out. And hopefully, knock on wood, I've got enough room to blend here so I don't have to paint this door. That's one of my goals, is don't paint the door. Here, I've got enough room here to where I'm not going to have to even have color out here. Right here, I've got another scar. So I'm going to have to paint that area anyways. So between that, and that, I've got a zone here between these two panels that I'm going to blend color with. Then I put the M&M shell back on the candy with the clear coat. It's really, really difficult to just stop in the middle of a panel with clear coat. You always want to go to the next available panel break. So with the fender, no problem. I'll even have it off of the car to paint it so I don't have to have overspray on this welting, and I'll walk you through all of that stuff too. But the big challenge with this thing is that from here, all of the roof, all the way over to the other side, all the way over here, there's no place to break it off. So my challenge is going to be where to stop my clear coat, and how do I do that to make sure that you can't see where I stopped painting. So look at this right here. The owner of the car actually asked me to fix this. This is a pot metal stanchion. This is steel, so we're going to fix this too. So obviously we're going to take all of these parts off the car, and I don't have to paint the deck lid because I've got a natural break there. The challenge here is where to break the paint off. And I'll walk you through that process too. And I just saw something else that I need to fix. It's this right here. Dang it, it keeps growing. It keeps getting bigger. So we're going to start the bodywork process. But the first thing we're going to do before any of that is I'm going to protect the rest of this beautiful car. I'm going to bag the rest of it, and I'm going to make sure I'm not getting dust or overspray either inside or outside on the panels that don't need any repair. So got a little bit of work to do. Now I'm ready to get to work, but the first thing I'm going to do before I pick up tool number one is to cover the rest of this car. I don't want to deal with overspray on it. I don't want to do any more damage. I've got some body shop safe plastic here. And we are going to bag this thing of beauty first, do no harm, right? So just to recap this damage, we've got, I think it's 5 places. There's this scratch right here. There's this scratch right here. There's this scratch right here. And this one, which is a rub with some slight metal distortion. And what we're doing also is we are addressing this crack in the seam right here. The trunk and this were not stamped in the same way. They're not stamped as the same panel. The stamping dies would have had to been really complex, and they joined 2 panels together. And this seam is a lead joint, and that's what we see deteriorating here. And it's just a little bit of a crack in the surface, but that's what it is. So I'm going to fix that for my good friend that owns this car, just because it's kind of an eyesore. Every time you wax it, it fills up. So there's our 5 zones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go for the win, for the least involved repair the first time. This one I'm going to have to be careful with. It's a pretty deep gouge, but I want to protect that welting. I don't want to get I don't want to scuff it. I don't want to sand, so I'm going to protect that. That's not even the first one I'm going for. I'm going to fix this one. So when you look at it from the side, you can tell, if I can get my light just right, you can tell, kinda, yeah you can, that there's no dent there. There's no metal distortion. With this one, there's no metal distortion. It's just a gouge. This guy across the top here, we can pull our light across it. You can see that fluorescent fixture doesn't change shape. There's a better, no, yeah, there's a better version of it. But this guy here, when we get it on profile, we can see a slight bit of, it's a bit of a dent right through here. So that one's going to require some body filler, more so than the others. The others are just, they're fairly simple to fix. So the first one I'm going to fix is right here. Although I've got to be super careful and make sure that this is a small repair. What I mean by that is that I'm not going to paint this door. I'm going to blend the color into, here's the door jamb right here, right? I'm going to blend the color and stagger it out so I don't have a color mismatch between this panel and that panel. And it's not an easy blend. We've got a great color match according to the computer, but I got to keep this repair as small as possible, like the rest of them. The pinstripe, wow, man. You and me both are going to figure that out, because I got some striping enamel. I've got some one-shot, but it's not this color, so we're going to have to figure that out. So I'm going to go this repair. I'll do this one. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for other things to dry, I might gouge out this and see if I can address that. And then we'll put some formal body fill in that, hammer dolly it a little bit, get the shape back, and there we go. Before I do any of that, just like I protected the rest of the car, I'm going to clean this surface. I don't know what wax, what carnubas, what hand and finger grease. I've been touching it without gloved hands, so I'm going to clean it with 2 stages of cleaning before I do anything. Now, I'm using my Exalta cleaners. I've got a water-based cleaner and a solvent-based cleaner. Typically, I do water-based and solvent-based. That's my method. 2 cleanings always, always. If you don't have Body Shop chemicals, you can use a good glass cleaner, not a Windex, but an aerosol glass cleaner, because it's got alcohol in it. It's a good cleaner. And even acetone. So if you don't, there's no excuses for working on a dirty surface. You've got your cleaners. If you don't have the Body Shop stuff, in a pinch, you can use acetone and a good glass cleaner. I'm not endorsed by Sprayway, but that seems to be the one that's available out in all of the retail stores. So that's the one that I reach for in a pinch. So what gives me a little bit more confidence with this repair is the fact that it's a modern base coat clear coat system. And I can treat this like a conventional repair, like a late model repair. And I can use all my Body Shop tricks that I learned back in my days in the collision repair industry to keep the repair small, and to, well, treat it like a production job, which is kind of a cool thing. I didn't know what to expect when we first got this car in. There's always a way to skin the cat, right? But doing the testing on it, like I showed you how to do, you can read your surface, you can figure out what it is so that you could create what I call a repair strategy. It sounds like I'm putting too many words in it. I don't know. It sounds like I'm trying to be a big shot and say fancy things and all that stuff, but we got to know what we're doing. We got to know what direction to go in. We have to know what we're working on, and we have to know what's compatible with it in order to properly repair it. All right, so here's something interesting. I cleaned this pretty thoroughly with a water-based cleaner. When I come back and clean it with the solvent-based cleaner, look how much crunk that I pulled off of that surface. That's why I clean with the two-step method. So you're welcome, do it, do it. People talk about, oh, I got fish eyes in my primer. You clean your stuff, clean your substrate. You can minimize that by 85%. Write that down. Anyway, now we're ready to start doing some stuff, doing some damage here. All right, cool. Let's get after it, man. Whoops. Whoops. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Pardon me. Sorry. Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry. Pardon me. I'm 10. Oh. So I am going to use a little bit of filler with this. If I decided to feather that out and level it out with the rest of the surface, I'm going to grow that repair by a lot. So I don't want to do that. And the same token, I don't want to just fill it up with filler. If you look super close, like it's super tight to that. If that, see if this, I think it's going to, oh, yeah, look at that focus. You can see on the bottom edge of that, you can see that serrated edge, like a knife edge. My finger keeps putting it out of focus, but you can see that that is a jagged edge. Wasn't that an Alanis Morissette song in the 90s, I think? Jagged little edge. If you just wipe a bunch of filler over that, that is going to map through. And what that means is you might fill it in, you might level it out, you might paint over it. But in expansion and contraction with heat cycles out in the sun, that edge is going to show through. So we got to smooth that edge out. We got to scoop it a little bit. I've got 180 on a piece of sandpaper here. So what I'm going to do is try and be as least invasive as possible. And I got to tell you, my heart's doing the pitter-patter when I sand on this vehicle and this surface. But I'm feathering this out. And by feathering, I mean blending out. If you're not familiar with body shop terminology, feathering is to taper that edge into the surrounding surface to create a smooth transition. So I'm using 180, which I've looked on the data sheet for my body filler, and 180 is safe for me to put filler on top of. I'm not even going to worry about that scratch because it's probably just in the clear coat. Well, yeah. All right. I don't want to finger sand that, so I've got my sanding block here. Okay, so that's, you can see I've got it wiped out. The scratch disappears. It was only in the clear coat. All right, surface prep done. We can even see the layers. Top layer is white, that's clear coat, and we can see a color layer, and we can see a primer layer, and then we see the metal. So that is the extent of the prep I'm going to do. I will wipe some filler on that judiciously, and yeah, we're going to move forward now. So that guy's done. Like I said, I'm going to say that these are giant chips that came out of the side. It just makes me, angsty to do that. I've got to do a paint repair on those, so guess what? It just grew. So I'm going to feather these. To the pinstripe artist that did this, sorry guy. We got to do a whole repair on this whole car, so we're going to have to copy your work and copy over top of it. But I can't do it with a lumpy surface. Kevin, you don't have PPE on. Why don't you have a mask on? Well, if I was making dust instead of crumbs, I would, so. All right, throw it down in the comments section. No sarcasm there, I mean it. Throw it down in the comments section. All right, so this is kind of more of a test than anything to see what this is going to do, and I'll get a good feather edge on that. That'll be fine. 180 is a little harsher than I want. A lot of these seams, you got to be careful because these style lines like this, sometimes they were sculpted out of lead. They weren't stamped in. You got to treat them with a little respect, just like the rest of the car. This thing's lasted nearly 100 years, so I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything stupid. All right, so this guy down here, I'm gonna save that for last because I have not protected the welting yet. So this, if you look real close, you can see on the either side of that edge, you can see the edges of the scratch lifting up. Hope you can anyways. It's super detailed, it's super minutia, but I can't just plaster a bunch of repair materials on top of that. Again, I've got to feather that out. Kind of like when you go to the ER. They got to clean the wound. I'm not so much worried about real estate here. I've got room to blend this. I still want to keep my repair small and respect the rest of the panel. So I'm not going nuts. But I can be a little more free with my motion. Also, I'm going to guess that this red oxide primer underneath is a lacquer primer. It sands super easy and it comes right down to metal super easy. So I don't know the age of this restoration on this car, but as I'm learning more about it, as I dig into it, I'm going to guess, oh, look at that gouge, it's so deep. I'm going to guess that it's a non-catalyzed primer and that it's a lacquer base. So I've got to be careful what I put on top of it. The danger with a repair material going on top of a uncatalyzed lacquer surface or uncatalyzed enamel, something without a hardener in it, is that the solvent that you're spraying on or wiping on can even reflow that primer and make it gummy. And then if it gets hard on top of that gummy, it stays gummy. It becomes unstable underneath. So when you're doing forensics, I don't know, I watch those TV shows, but when you're doing the forensics on something like this, and I've done several repairs on these pre-war vintage cars, trying to understand and do a proper diagnosis on what's there and what we can put on top of it to do a good repair that's not going to show back through like a scar, then you got to use materials that are going to properly band-aid it and create a barrier between that weaker surface and the newer materials, which this car has on it. All right, so that's all we're doing on that. Keep in mind, that's 180 grit. But I need that for my body filler to stick, because I'm going to do a body filler repair on that. It's going to be micro thin, but it's going to level the surface out to the surrounding crown and contour of this panel. Now I'm going to protect that welting right now because I keep talking and I keep forgetting what I'm doing, and I'm going to protect that, and then we're going to deal with the gouge. I'm going to put a couple layers of tape on there, and I'll never even touch the tape with the sandpaper, but if I didn't, then I would knock the heck out of it and make a big giant mess. Again, I'm prepping with 180, and I can see metal underneath there. I don't know what type of metal it is. I'm guessing this is lead also. I don't know. It sure is soft. Makes sense that it might be lead because I don't know where this panel is joined to this panel, but I'm assuming this is a seam that's been body worked up by a technician in 1935 or so. I'm going to put a face to it. I'm going to call him Raymond. And Raymond is the guy that worked on this car. And he did a fantastic job. Now, I'm not talking about the last restoration. I'm talking about building this car. And Raymond was at the Packard assembly plant. And he took a lot of pride in his work. And I want to respect Raymond because he's probably forgotten more about repair in his first 10 years of doing car building than I'll ever learn in my lifetime. And we owe guys like Raymond a nod of respect, if nothing else, because this car's lasted an awfully long time and the work is outstanding. All right, so I can just wipe that and I can see my tapered and feathered layers. Yes, it's tight, that's okay. But the paint is not flaking around it, and that's a feathered repair. There is a gouge there. We've got tools and materials to fix that. Now this guy, we're gonna have to do some bumping, some hammer and dolly stuff, so I've got to get appropriate tools. I'm just looking, and you're going to have to trust me on this because it's hard to see. But I'm looking here. What I'm doing is looking at the reflection of what's in that wall, and I'm reading the reflection to see where the dents start. And like I said, I don't even know that the camera will pick it up, but it starts right about there. And it goes to right about here. So there's my repair zone for the metal. That's where we got to do some tap, tap, tap. All right, so I'm going to get some tools and a roller seat because my knees already hurt. I'll be back in a second.
I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
All right, so right here from this point, I can really read the surface. What I mean by that is I can see the reflection in it, and I can tell where my damage starts. And my line right here is spot on, and it goes to about here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hammer, which is it's a fairly low crown hammer, and I'm going to tap from the inside because I can actually get a bit of a hammer blow, and I'm using my fist. I'm tapping like this, right? Not a whole lot of shall we say, effort is required here because it's single wall, and something about the metal in these cars, it's glorious. It does what you ask it to. So my dolly face is not perfectly flat. It's crowned in a little bit. It matches pretty close to what that surface is. So what I'm going to do is you hammer on dolly right at the low point of that dent and just kind of work it a little bit. I can tell, I can even push on the back of it until where my hammer's got to be. So, and I know I'm coming into contact somewhat with the dolly because it's bouncing. Normally I've got earplugs in, but we're not doing a whole lot of power swinging here. Use as little filler as possible. Still low-ish right in there, but also I can see a couple of dings. I'm going to work that area right here. A dent is interesting. A dent in a panel is not just a dent. It's in there, but it's out surrounding the dent. So it's like things got rearranged. It's not an absence of metal. It's not a hole in the metal. It's a distortion of the shape. And a dent can't, it's not a metal that's gone. So the metal has to go somewhere. So pressure dictates, because there's pressure in this panel, that as this part of the panel might be pushed down, the surrounding area gets pushed out, which means also that it comes up. So each dent has a little raised area around it. So we've got to respect that. Right here, and you can see it makes sense. This is the biggest part of the damage. That's where it's the lowest. A little bit high right there. I'm still seeing a little bit of low right there on that big rub mark, so we're going to come back and chase that out a little bit. And I think that's all the bashing I'm going to do, because I think that's got it. I think that's pretty smooth. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to wet it with my wax and grease remover, and then take a look. What does it show me? What does it show me? It shows me I'm still high right here. I'm still a little bit high right there. It's interesting when you give the opportunity of the surface to talk to you, what it says. It's still a little bit low right in there. Huh. And you guys understand what I'm doing, right? When I'm wetting that out, obviously you can see it. It just gives me the impression of what this is going to look like with a layer of super thin clear coat on it. So it's like a window into the future. It's the future, man. So I'm going to roll with that, you know? So I'm going to feather that out. And then we're going to go back with our polyester stuff. And I'm going to use good quality fillers. We'll read the instructions too. All right, so we're ready for the next step. I'm going to blow that out, make sure that I'm not jamming a bunch of solvent underneath the paint, and we're going to feather, and then we're going to fill it. All right, so I've got my next level block with the acrylic face because I want a super flat surface, because I want to make a super flat surface. So I'm just going to feather this out. Now, there's no gouges in the paint. We haven't broken through the clear coat right here. So I'm going to treat that with really fine grits. But I am going to surface it down. I will judiciously wipe a skim coat. So you can tell even it's still a little bit low there. Not very much, but it's still low there, right? Because I haven't sanded it. I've got a flat surface, which helps me read the surface. So that's not metal, that's filler. So we've uncovered somebody's... Wow! You've uncovered somebody's body work right there. So there's metal, there's filler. Big difference. I don't want to dig a hole, but I don't want to put body fill over top of those hard edges. So I want to feather that. So I'm going to trust this to body filler because I feel like if I hammer from the backside anymore, I can risk cracking that filler. I don't want to do that. But this right here, I'm going to tap it a little bit more because obviously it's low because my flat block hasn't touched the middle part, so there's a depression there. I'm going to tap this out just a bit more. Yeah, look at that. I brought it out just enough. We're now, I mean, we're talking micro thin layer of body fill right there. And that's totally fine. I'm totally good with that. I'm not sure what's coming up here, but I don't really care for it. So I'm going to feather that. So I can keep it small because the surface area that I have to re-establish is crowned and it's narrow. If this is a super flat panel, my repair area would be a lot bigger. But because I can take advantage of the crown this way and that way, my repair zone can be real specific to the damage. So we are going to clean that again. And I'm going to rock some filler on this stuff. Oh, wait, we got one more. Okay, hang on. All right, so this repair is going to be a compromise. Remember, we're not restoring this car, we're repairing damage. And there's a very big difference between the two. I'm working on top of what's already there for the most part. But in instances like this, I got to get down below it. So just because I've seen these cars naked, I know that that's probably a lead seam. It's been repaired, so it might be polyester filler. I don't know. But what I do know is that if I paint over that crack, it's going to just look like a painted crack. And so I'm going to use my carbide burr and gouge that just a little bit. Because it might be lead, I'm going to wear a mask. All right, so here's something interesting. Super low RPM, right? A 25-year-old carbide burr is sort of dull. And look at the metal shavings around there. That's lead. That was my suspicion, that the lead was fractured a little bit. So what I've done is a V-groove on that, and it's very similar to a fiberglass repair, actually. You do a V-groove, and then you put substrate repair material back on top of it, and yeah, and we cross our fingers and hope. This is, what I'm going to use on this is a short strand fiberglass, which will harden very similar to the hardness, the durometer of lead, and that actually is an acceptable repair. So I'm going to feather this out, and we'll treat this with a little bit of fiberglass, and knock on wood, it'll be ready for the next 80 plus years. All right, that gets me what I need right there. So I'll pre-clean that again, and we'll come back, and I want to do that one first, and I'll explain why when I'm doing it. So I'm not soaking down the material. I've got my cleaner on the rag, and I'm wiping the surface. I don't want it to soak down into that weak primer, or that lacquer primer, whatever it is, or certainly not into any voids in there. So I'm not flooding the panel with a cleaning solvent. So now we're ready for some filler. I'm going to start with that first with some fiberglass, and we'll move on to the others. Are you having fun yet? I'm kind of having fun. So this is the filler that I'm going to use. It's an Evercoat reinforced repair compound filler, and I'm going to be applying it with this guy, but I need a really small one. So we're going to do the score trick and snap, and that gets us a tiny little spreader that we can be very accurate with. And that's probably more than what I'll need. And the ratio is 2% by weight. I don't have scales down here, but I know that I just need a tiny amount of catalyst in this. So I'm not even going to put it on my blob of filler. I'm going to put it beside, because that's way too much. Way too much. So I'm going to do this. Put that over there. Now, we can mix in. Doesn't take long on a small batch like this, but you always want to be sure. Now, from the minute you start intermixing your catalyst, you've got roughly 6 minutes, unless it's really cold, and you might buy another minute or two, but you don't have very much time to get your catalyst blended and get the stuff on the panel. So that's what we're doing right now. So I'm going to Bob Ross this and My first smear is going to be super tight so that I don't create any air pockets. So you can see that I've got the filler all the way through there. That's like I call it a primer coat of body fill. Now I can add for a little bit of material thickness and still keep that repair small. All right, so I'm going to come back with a different filler, but this is to fill the groove and the crack in the lead. And that's all we need to do. The reason I wanted to do this first is because lead oxidizes very quickly. And if you're going to leave it exposed to atmosphere for 2 hours, 3 hours a day, you want to scuff it up again because it's a very sacrificial, it's a weak metal and it absorbs contamination really quickly. So it was moments ago that we surfaced that down and got down to different material, and we've covered it up within moments, so I feel good about that. So I love these peel away sheets because you can get a new perfect surface. But I'm going to set this aside and it's going to talk to me a little bit. This will tell me when it's set up as well. So this is the catalyst for the fiberglass. Keep it separate. This is the filler we're going to be using. This is metal glaze. It's very thin, very flowable, and we don't require a whole bunch of mil thickness on this filler. So we're just going to get this metal glaze, which if you look at it, is kind of fun. Green means go. When it turns from a pink to a green, then it's ready to be surfaced, i.e. sanded. So I've got very small areas to stuff this in, so I'm going to use a little bit bigger spreader than the other one, but I'm going to still use a small guy. And I've run into a lot of guys over the years that use either a metal blade. My good friend Randy Felsky uses a metal spatula, kind of like a drywall thing, and he is really, really good at auto body repair. I worked at a GM dealership with Randy, and he would use the metal spatula and get a super clean, super flat surface. And I've always gotten used to these plastic ones that are flexible, and you know, to each his own. So 2% by weight. Again, I don't have a scale. I've got the proper catalyst. That's way too much, and we're just going to have to move fast. Using my figure eights. And we're just blending it in, right? If you see streaks, you're not blended. What are you doing, Kevin? Why are you going all out flat with your body filler? The reason being is because if you have it in a big gnarly ball, there's a really good chance you're trapping air pockets in it. When you spread it out flat, you can even see, little craters. Those are air pockets. So especially with this flowable putty, you can not only see if you're blended, which we are, but you're also letting the air escape. And because it's not in a ball, it's not going to kick as fast either. We'll talk about that some other time, but it's Bondo science. But anyway, so I'm going to come up here, and again, we're going to do a super tight wipe down in the valley. And this repair, I'm keeping super small. So I might even wipe over onto my unprepped paint. And by the way, Internet, this filler is paint safe if you've got it prepped to the proper grit, which is 180. And we do. So that's going to hold still and wait for us. This guy here, same thing, although I've got a bit of more of a zone. I'm going to get down there into the crack. You can see now I've got the crack completely filled. And I'm going to come back for my build. Mr. Hand's going to get in the way of Mr. Camera. But that's okay. I want a little bit more than that. That's a pretty deep gully right there. This stuff is very easy to block down, so if I have to put another layer on, I might do it. I'm going to, all right, I can't leave it alone. I'm going to leave it alone. So this again, we're doing a tight wipe onto the surface. No pinholes. And now I can come back and put enough material on to complete the repair. You can always tell if your filler's starting to kick by how grainy it looks. And this doesn't look grainy at all. All right, so now, again, we're coming in for a tight wipe, primer coat, spewing all over the place. I'm okay with that. And now, I'll get enough on there to do the drywall trick and get our mud smoothed out. Now this small spreader is probably too small for this area, but it'll be fine. So now I'm going to move it around. I'm going to assume.
When you assume, you make an ass of you and me.
Ass you me. But I've got enough on there. I'm not worried about this first application of filler being perfect. It doesn't matter. This one, if anything, it can show me what I still need to wipe on. And it's fine if we have to go back in for a second application. Don't get stressed out by your body filler. I'm cleaning up the edges so I don't have any pollution. That's what I call it, around the edges. All these areas here, because every quarter inch that you go outside of your repair zone, that means you're having to sand those areas. So we're going to leave that alone and let that kick. So when we come back over here, let's take a look. This turns green when it's ready to block down. Obviously, it's not green. This stuff doesn't turn green, but we can touch it. Ah, yeah, see? It's really close. It's still gummy, still like bubble gum. But we can read our overmix, which will let us know when it's ready to block down. That said, if you miss the window, it's okay. It's just easier to block when it's right within that perfect zone. And because I'm cheap and old, I'm going to clean these guys off and save them. Tack tip. Here you go. Wax and grease remover. Wipe off your spreader while the filler is still wet. It comes right off. And now, if your spatula is the right size, you got a perfectly clean one for the next application. You're welcome.
Yay!
All right, so our filler here is turned green, and this hasn't turned green, but it's harder than Chinese arithmetic, so we are ready to go and block that down. Let's go. Yep, okie dokie. So we're going to go with our fiberglass first, and because there's glass in the name of it, I'm going to put a mask on. And I'm just going to knock the top down. I'm wearing safety glasses only because they've got reading lenses at the bottom of them and I can actually see. So what I'm going to do here, so I've got 80, I'm just going to be super careful. and I'm just shaping it up just a little bit. I don't want to get those 80 grit scratches anywhere else other than the glass filler. So I'm breaking my own rule. If you've ever watched any Paintucation training videos, you'll see that I say don't use the toe of the block. Don't use just that, you're defeating the purpose of using a sanding block. But look at this shape. It's very, very concave. So I'm using the toe of the block. You gotta know the rules in order to properly abuse them. You can't break a rule that you don't know in the first place. Now we're past that resin layer, we're starting to powder a little bit. And we've got another layer of filler over top of this. This is just to protect and to band-aid that crack. I said crack. It's slow going, but I'm trying to be really careful, not jam a bunch of 80 grit scratches into the surrounding area. All right, so now it's contouring to the shape of everything. So that's 80. I'm going to put that down. And I've got one of my favorite tools right here. This is Soft Sander, Style Line Corporation. The shape of it, guess what? It matches the shape I'm trying to recreate. I've got 120. All right, so my fingertipometer says that we've got a nice feather on that. So I'm going to stop, because you can actually see, look down on that surface, you can actually see that I'm feathered out into the surrounding area. I've put an effective barrier over top of the cracked lead, if it's even cracked. I think it was just cracked in the very top surface. Anyway, Band-Aid complete. So I'm going to wipe filler on the rest of that, and we can move on to another spot. So this one, I'm super nervous with this one, folks, because I've got this much room to blend color. So I'm going to have to pull all the tricks out of my hat to keep this a small repair. And all I'm doing with this block, because this block is essentially useless for flattening things out because it's flexible. All I can do is knock the top off, which gets me to the point to where I can actually bring a tool in here that I can create a flat surface with. All right. It's this guy. So one of my rules is that we scale the size of the tool to the size of the repair. So just because my block is small doesn't mean that it's not flat. It is very flat because it's acrylic. And I've got 120 sandpaper. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's 150 sandpaper. Now I've got 150 sandpaper. I've knocked the top off. Now I can block this out with 150. Because guess what's compatible with 150 and 220? The next step of my repair. That's right. I'm going to use a high build polyester primer on this. And put a surface on it that is much less inclined to show the edges of my repair. With the high build poly, it forms a really super hard skin on the top. Hey Kevin, how do you know when the repair is flat? Here's how to tell. You can see there how the edges are getting translucent. This is a hard edge, that's a softer edge. When everything feathers out and looks milky without a defined edge around it, then it's flush and level with the surface. From the point where you can start to see through it, it doesn't take much at all to flatten it out. And you want to leave some of that translucent around the outside, otherwise you can dig a hole and it'll look like a depression when you paint it. We don't want that. We want it to be invisible. So right there, that hard edge has disappeared. It's still here and here a little bit. So now, that area, that's as much of a feather as I'm going to put on that. I'm going to come back and I might prep that with 220 around the area. But that's filled in right there. So we are super close to being primer ready there. Now we can come back and hit the rest of these guys in no particular order. I've got 80 on this area. So I switched to 150 up here, but all of this has been prepped with 80, and I've just got it rough shaped and feathered on the edges. So now we're going to switch to 150 grit on the other repair areas. Before I do that, I'm going to use this stuff. This is a powdered guide coat. There's several different brands and manufacturers. This is Kovac. It's graphite powder-ish, and what it does is it fills in the scratches that we've just created. And what it does from there is it talks to us and it tells us whether or not we've removed those scratches. So it's a great tool, because the worst thing that can happen, it's not the worst thing that can happen. Something that used to happen to me a lot before I started using this stuff is that I would body work an area and then I'd see these scratches come back around where I knew there was body work. And it was because the paint materials were sinking into the scratches that I never removed. When we use this contrast, this powdered guide coat, we can see where those sanding scratches are. All right, look in there. You can literally see where there's still existing sand scratches. So we use the guide coat to tell when we've got those areas feathered and when we've got them leveled down, and the big gnarly scratches, they're going to come back and bite us, are gone. I've still got work to do there. You see that? See how the big gnarly scratches there? Will primer fill it in? Yeah. But I want an even uniform scratch, the same grit all the way across my primer zone, so I don't have to ask the primer to do too much. Because the danger in doing that is that you'll have air pockets in the deep scratches and voids that you have to make excuses for. So we're going to call that ready for primer, except for the fact that now I've got 150 grit scratches around here. So I'm going to come back around there and knock those out with probably 220. We never jump more than 100 particles per square inch when we're changing grits. That's kind of dangerous, and it's kind of not the best strategy. So I'm going to come here, just block a little bit more, just so I know. Yeah, that's pretty dang flat. So I'm going to come back in, I'll block that with 220, get rid of my scratches there. So now I've got a tight, nice little repair zone that's perfectly flat. So I've got, let's see, this guy here. It's a weird complex shape. It's coved in, so I'm being very careful. Now I'm going to break a rule. Guess what fits in there? My finger fits in there. So guess what's sticky? My sandpaper. Now I'm going to use my sandpaper to ride that contour and help me feather that area out, which that's working quite well. Now I'll come back in, chase that with 220, get rid of those 150 grit scratches, rinse and repeat right here. Same thing. So I've established my shape with the 80 grit. I felt it, I'm happy with it. This 150, it's just kind of reaffirming that, but look at those 80 grit scratches. I'm telling you, man, that will come back to harm you. That'll come back and show through the paint job, and we just don't want that. We don't want anybody to ever know that we've been here. I don't want the owner of this car to look at that and go, oh, I remember that. Oh, you can still see. You can still see where that mailbox jumped out and hit my car. Whatever happened, I don't know. I wasn't there. So I'm feeling this, it feels good. I'm looking at the outside edge. It's a nice milky edge transition, except for right there, but that's a hard crown. And that's a successful repair right there. Now we're ready for the wet work. Now we're ready for the high build primers. That's another stage of repair material that will block down, but we do it in stages. One more thing I'm going to do, and I don't see any pinholes either, but one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, this fiberglass place right here, I'm actually going to come back with a polyester filler and come back over top of that and give that a coating past that edge that I know I can trust. So we're getting close, man. Some 220, some more poly, and more time. I don't know. We're getting there, right? Yeah. All right, one last layer of finishing filler on this. It's going to be super thin. And we'll level that out, and then we're ready for primer surfacer on that. Just want to make sure I've got, there we go. Okay, leave it alone. All right, everything else is wiped. Now take some 220, block around these guys, and then we'll talk about primer filler. over top of our wipeable filler, which is different than primer surfacer. I'll explain the 3 primers, but primer filler goes over this wipeable filler next, and yeah. That takes care of the 220, except for my little lead repair up here. So that's got us the right grit for our primer product. I'm going to do a little more masking. When I prime, I'm going to mask this, but when I actually paint this panel, the fender's coming off, just because I want to completely remove that welting. I don't want to paint around it, because we'd have an edge and it gets weak and that type of stuff. So I'm going to wait for that to set up, and I'll block that flat and get it up to the same place as the rest of it. Meantime, I'm going to evacuate some dust off of this here, and I'm excited. This actually went really well. This feels, I'll do the bodyman wave. Oh, I'm sorry, the bodyman feel where you're looking off and you're letting your hands, okay, fingertips talk to me. It's like a seance. Yeah, okay, all right. This is not going to take long. We got 150. The trick is getting it flat and shaping it right while you're leaving enough on there to be the proper repair material that it needs to be. All right, so that's 150. Here comes Mr. 220. And we're ready to blow this off and wipe it and get some high build polyester primer surfacer on there. Yeah, that's what I said. When I protect this welting from overspray, I'm going to use the edge of the tape. I'm also going to kind of do one better. When I stretch this tape, it wants to cling and curl under. So I can use that to my advantage. See how that does there? It's fun and interesting. That's going to be fine. I don't want this hard edge right there. And in fact, I don't even want primer up there. So I'm going to do another back taping technique. This is fun. Fun with tape, right? So when I just lay the tape flat, it sticks. But when I press on one side of it and I pull on it, look what it does. That's a soft edge. That's not a hard edge. That's a soft taped edge. So what that's going to do is if I get overspray up against that, it's going to be a rounded over edge instead of a hard edge. Maybe it seems like it's a subtle difference. It shouldn't make much of a difference, but it does. So there's probably somebody out there in YouTube land saying, "Oh, you should take the fender off." I will. I want to get it under poly right now. And then while that's curing, I'll get the fender off. And don't forget, I've got this place to fix too. This little jewel of a failure here. That's steel, that's pot metal. You can just see. So anyway, I've got to figure out a way to fix that also before we go to paint. Another area is right here that I'm going to use a back taping strategy. So right here, again, I'm pressing the tape and pulling it. I'm starting over because it didn't do what I wanted it to. Pressing the tape and, see there's my soft edge. here. Do that. And again, right here, I don't want overspray up here. I've got to fearlessly protect that. And I'm just going to repair this. So I need to make sure that I control where my overspray is, so I'm not a victim of it, you know what I mean? I need to tell it where to go instead of just be at its mercy. So that said, I'm going to do one better on this too. And I think Collision Edge has a tool that does this automatically. But again, I'm protecting this because I don't want overspray on there. Here, I can sand it off. Here, be careful. And I'm just going to take my chances out there. I think I'm out of a roll of tape. Two points. Here's another roll of tape. I'm okay with all of this stuff here. I'm not going to be going wild with air pressure anyway. But I am going to do my back taping on here. Like that. Just in case Mr. Overspray wants to find a new happy home on the Brightwork, on that cool looking wheel. I'm going to protect that as well. Brian Finch, if you're watching, no, I haven't gotten any better at masking. So I'm just noticing something. Come here, take a look. Looking super tight in there. You see those dots? See the black dots? You know what those are, folks? Those are air pockets and pinholes. So we're going to do one step. Oh, look, there's another one. Now that I'm tuned into it, there's another one right there. See that? So what's going to happen is if I just prime that, there's a good chance that that air pocket is going to swell up like a big fat inverted grape, and I'm going to have to do some surgical maneuver to stuff primer down in the pinhole when there's a product that I'm going to wipe on here that takes care of those things. So I'm glad that I saw that. And I'll hip you to something. If you've ever done body work before and had pinholes in your filler, this stuff is going to make you happy. I'm going to do one more thing. Protect that area. Pin its ears back. I like when that happens. So this product is a micro pinhole eliminator. Evercoat's version of it is 440 Express. It's 1K, and if you don't know what that means, it doesn't have a hardener, but it dries really fast and really hard. So we've got a sponge applicator, and the sponge makes sure that it gets worked down into the pores, but dragged off the surface so it doesn't have any stand-up. We're just gonna rub it in like that. So I'm gonna come back and knock over that with some sandpaper. I can see some tiny little black dots. That shows me that it's filling in some holes. Do the same thing down here. But we can really see it here. You see all those accentuated dark spots. Those are air pockets, man. It just happens. It's part of the polyester thing, you know, and once you do your figure eights and you do your diligence and wipe and try not to get pinholes, it happens. So this is a way to, as the cool kids say, mitigate that. Especially right here where I don't want to mess around with anything. All right, so I'm going to let that flash off. I'll come back and just knock over the top of that with some hand sandpaper. I'll give it a few minutes. The important thing about this is that it's not a putty. It's not a catalyzed putty, but the way it hardens, it matches the hardness level of the filler. So there's not an inconsistency. And it fills in the pinholes and it becomes very, very, very non-porous, so it's not going to sink in over time. Yeah, it's just a good idea, and I'm so glad they came out with this because pinholes, the struggle is real. It's a real thing. All right, give me about 4 minutes. And this is just an okay stand up off. It might have paint crusty stuff. Might not through the surface. I haven't done that. I'm going to do that. This is my water-based cleaner. I'm going to come back and just get all the dust off. Body shop dust, even though it's not made from mud and dirt, needs to be treated like dust from a dusty road. Otherwise, it can interfere with the adhesion of the coatings that you're going to put on. Speaking of coatings, I'm going to go mix up some primer. And we are ready to spray primer. I'm stoked. This is, yeah, this is big. All right, I've got my primer mixed up. It's a polyester high build primer filler in spray form. So it's a filler, but it's also in spray form. It requires an incredibly large fluid tip, typically a 2.0. My favorite poly gun is a 2.5, huge garden hose. Guess what this is? Not a 2.0. So if I've got the right gun, my pattern is going to be probably about that wide and a big, nice elliptical shape, and I'm going to be putting it on like I'm pouring it on. But we can break some rules here. This is a tiny gun. It's a 1.2 fluid tip, very small orifice. So what happens when I push a thick primer through a small gun is the pattern shrinks, right? We'll still get a wet application, it's just going to be smaller. That plays in my favor here. So this is the one instance where my TDS sheet tells me I need a 2.0 to 2.5 fluid tip. I'm using a 1.2, but I can be super careful and be very precise as to where I want to put my primer. So that's the big thing. Scale the tool to the size of the repair. I'm doing small spot repairs within a panel and just being very careful that I don't have overspray pollution, which is how I refer to it, on the panel. So we're going to PPE up. This is a non-isocyanate primer, so I'm good with a charcoal respirator as long as it's in date. We're doing this. I'm going to turn Mr. Camera on. And we're going to set the air pressure. All right. Go, gadget robot. All right. Oh, where's my glasses? Safety glasses serve a dual purpose for Kevin because he's blind, needs the reader lenses in the bottom. They also protect your eye from stuff. So here we go. All right, so to demonstrate, we'll set our pressure, I don't know, 15, something 13. So look at my pattern there. I'm still getting a nice wet pattern, but it's 2 inches, 3 inches, 2.5 inches. So what that does is it allows me to be real careful in how I'm putting this product on, which plays very well to what I'm trying to do overall. So as long as I'm getting a nice wet coat, which is a closed circuit coat, closed structure coat, sorry, you can see that's nice and wet. And it's all applied like it needs to be. So I want to do one thing here. I'm going to mess around the orientation of the air cap. Use it like an airbrush. My first coat, I want it to just cover up the filler. There we go. And we can be a little more careless down here. I'm actually going to do the upper part first. Ah, there's one of those pinholes that I missed. All right, I'll show you how to deal with that in a sec. One coat at a time. This is the larger area here. I'm just going to go over a larger area here. So there's my first coat on all of it. We got to wait 5 minutes between coats. All right? But in the meantime, I got a trick. All right, there's no air hose attached to my spray gun, right? So what I'm gonna do is use this dropper. You see that pinhole right there? See that guy? He's making me mad. But I gotta fill it in. So what I'm gonna do, without air running through the gun, I'm just gonna get my dropper enough primer to feed that sucker. There, pinhole fixed. Take a close-up of that. The rest of them filled in with the 440 Express, but that got it. So I'm good to go on the rest of it. Now we just wait for the other 3 minutes out of our 5. So while we're waiting, this product has about a 45-minute pot life. What that means is that you got 45 minutes to get it out onto the project before it starts to get hard inside the gun. When that happens, it's really bad. So you want to clean your equipment out as quickly as possible after your spraying. Still respect your flash times, your between coat times, but just make sure that you clean it out properly within that 45 minutes. And also, there's a bunch of different polyesters. This one's an Evercoat. There's different brands. Each one has a technical data sheet. Find it online, read it, know it, understand it, love it, live it. We're waiting now. Test our pattern. We'll do this one first again. There we go. And this one's going to be super small. Trigger control, baby. There you go. Not wet. So wet-ish, wet adjacent. Okay, so this one here, I might have to go back in and block this a little more. That seems like I see a bit of a dent there. All right, and this one, now we wait another 5 minutes. We'll put a third coat on this stuff. Don't forget how you had your gun, Ted. I'm liking that. So that should give me plenty of material to block. Now I'm going to do one more thing right here. I don't care for that hard edge. If you ever miss that or forget about it, it's hard to deal with and sometimes it can map through. So normally I take lacquer thinner, but it's by the Clecos. So I'm just taking some hot solvent and I'm wiping it over. That now this is risky because you don't want to get your paper towel in your palm. All right, so what that's doing, you can see now it's a fuzzy line. I've just eliminated that hard edge from there. So now I go clean my gun out, and the technical data sheet on this product says that I can jump on it in 2.5 hours. I'm going to let it fully cure out. I'm going to let it sit. I'm probably going to let it sit overnight. This is not a production job. I'm not in a hurry for this job. I want to make sure that the product has done everything it's going to do, shrinking, curing, cross-linking, all those things. And be ready for me to do the final prep on it, you know. I get wrapped up sometimes because I spent so much time in collision shops, and you get it done right, you get it done perfectly and the first time, and you move on to the next one, and that's how you make a living. And we got used to doing best practice on every job, every single job, and hammering them through and cycling them through because that's how that whole industry works. But it's really kind of therapy to be able to go through like this, take the time that it takes, apply some of the techniques that are very efficient, and just build off of that. So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to break this video up into 2 parts. We've got a lot of material to cover because this is a weird repair. This is unusual and uncommon, and it's really interesting to me. So I'm having fun with this and explaining it, at least my method of doing things. So we're going to break it up into the repair and the refinish process because I don't think this needs to be a 3-hour video, and I want to give the chemistry time to settle in and do what it needs to do. So part 2 is going to be coming up on the powerful Packard potion. I can't think of another P, but I just want to say thanks for watching. Thanks for following me down the rabbit hole on something that I think is pretty interesting. And in the meantime, like and subscribe. Please do. Please comment. And please, if you happen to want to up your skills in any way, check out the Paintucation training products at the website. Links are in the description. And we'll see you guys next Saturday.